5 oil tanker captures, 48 hours. Maritime combat just erupted from covert sanctions implementation to open economic battle on the high seas. Pause. Calculate these captures carefully. This isn't isolated episodes. This is coordinated intensification. Thursday at February 6th, Iran's Revolutionary Guard captured 2 foreign oil tankers near Farsi Island, imprisoned 15 crew members, claimed 1 million L, smuggled fuel. Middle East Eye recorded captures occurred hours before Friday's Oman diplomatic discussions. Consider that scheduling. Capture tankers Thursday. Commence negotiations. Friday. That's not coincidence. That's advantage demonstration before discussions even commence. But wait. Thursday's Iranian captures were reaction to what occurred Wednesday. February 5th, India's Coast Guard intercepted 3 U.S.-sanctioned tankers 100 nautical miles west of Mumbai. Iran International validated vessels connected to Iran's shadow fleet. United 24 media recognized ships Stellar Ruby, Asphalt Star, Al Jafsia, all 3 sanctioned by U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control in 2025. Now calculate the mathematics. 3 Iranian tankers captured Wednesday, 2 foreign tankers captured Thursday, 5 total captures, 48 hours. Each capture activates counter-capture generating intensification, spiral nobody can manage. And here's what makes this disastrous rather than merely troubling. The crew imprisonments generate human advantage impossible to disregard politically. Iran holds 15 foreign nationals. India holds Iranian crews. Each imprisoned sailor represents diplomatic influence point, compelling governments to select between securing citizens versus sustaining hardline sanction stances, release crews and legitimize adversaries' legal reasoning for captures, keep crews imprisoned and confront domestic political influence to secure citizens' liberty. Either selection generates weakness, adversaries utilize. Pakistan Today documented India withdrew from Chabahar port arrangement with Iran weeks earlier after U.S. imposed 25% tariffs on countries conducting business with Tehran. So India's tanker captures serve American sanctions implementation even as U.S.-India relations involve complex regional assessments. Translation: America employs India as proxy for maritime interdictions, the way it employed Afghanistan against Soviet Union. India captures Iranian tankers. Iran responds against whoever's accessible. Maritime combat spreads through proxy activities nobody directly manages. But February's 48-hour capture cascade differs from previous reciprocal episodes because volume and scheduling suggest systematic intensification rather than isolated reactions. The Maritime Executive recorded Indian Coast Guard conducted sustained examination of captured vessels, analyzing electronic information and interrogating crews to expose global handler network. Moving sanctioned oil through vessel-to-vessel transfers in international waters. That language global handler network means India's targeting isn't random interdiction of suspicious vessels. It's intelligence-driven dismantling of entire smuggling framework. China and Russia assist Iran operate to circumvent sanctions, and Iran comprehends this. That's why Thursday's captures targeted foreign vessels carrying legitimate cargo rather than just Iranian shadow fleet. Intensification from defensive counteractions to offensive economic combat against neutral transportation. ZN News India documented Iran previously captured tanker with 16 Indian crew members in December. 8 released, 8 still imprisoned. February captures occurred while those 8 Indian sailors remain confined, generating additional diplomatic influence. So Iran holds human advantage over India. India reacts by capturing more Iranian tankers. Iran counter-intensifies by interdicting more foreign vessels. Each cycle raises stakes until somebody yields or combat commences. And the 48-hour schedule means choices are being executed faster than diplomacy can adjust. Thursday captures occurred before Friday's Oman discussions could address Wednesday's initial interdictions. Events surpassing negotiations. Tanker trackers recorded all 3 Indian-captured vessels were traveling in convoy towards Indian West Coast port by Sunday. That means formal legal proceedings commence. Crews confront prosecutions. Vessels impounded long-term, not temporary imprisonments. Permanent captures generating lasting economic harm. Iran International observed vessels exploited mid-sea transfers in international waters to transfer cheap oil from conflict-affected regions to motor tankers evading duties owed to coastal nations. That expression reveals Indian government legitimizing captures through domestic law implementation rather than just U.S. sanctions observance. Generating legal structure for permanent impoundment means India's not releasing these vessels quietly after diplomatic influence. They're establishing precedent for ongoing maritime interdiction operation targeting Iranian oil smuggling networks, and that permanence transforms Iran's reaction assessments. Temporary imprisonments get addressed diplomatically. Permanent captures demand military reactions or acknowledgement of strategic overcome. Which brings us to Thursday's Iranian counter-captures. Not just reciprocal response, warning demonstration. Continue capturing our tankers and observe maritime traffic through Strait of Hormuz. Confront systematic interdiction, regardless of flag nation or cargo legitimacy. Times of Israel documented IRGC forces approached U.S. flag tanker Tuesday, ordered engine halt and threatened boarding. Tanker accelerated instead and escaped. But attempt itself signals Iranian willingness to target American vessels directly rather than just neutral transportation. 5 captures, 48 hours, human hostages, permanent impoundments, direct warnings to U.S. vessels. Welcome to maritime economic combat, where every tanker capture activates counter-capture until somebody intensifies to kinetic force, terminating the spiral through violence. Friday's Oman discussions occurred amid this intensifying maritime confrontation. Diplomats negotiating nuclear agreements while navies capture each other's ships. The inconsistency reveals diplomacy's insignificance when economic combat already erupted. The 48-hour capture cascade reveals systematic approach nobody's examining. Iran's converting Strait of Hormuz into choke point, weaponized against global oil provisions. Here's the mechanism. 20% of globally traded oil passes through Hormuz. According to Euronews' previous coverage, every tanker capture that generates insurance rate surges, route diversions, supply chain disruptions affecting global markets immediately. So Iran doesn't need to seal the strait entirely. Just exhibit ability to interdict vessels selectively, generating uncertainty, compelling shippers to avoid the route, or acknowledge massive insurance premium expansions. The economic mathematics become devastating. Avoiding Hormuz means circumnavigating Africa, adding weeks to transportation times, millions in fuel expenses, and capacity limitations preventing timely deliveries. Insurance corporations calculate Iranian interdiction danger makes Hormuz transit uninsurable at reasonable rates. Either choice, circumnavigation or insurance premium surges, raises oil prices globally, even if actual volumes disrupted remain minimal. Market psychology matters more than physical provision when traders comprehend Iranian forces can capture tankers at will, and Thursday's captures proved exactly that capability. IRGC intercepted vessels near Farsi Island, Iranian territorial waters where American naval security cannot function without activating direct military confrontation. So tankers transiting Hormuz must pass through Iranian waters where Revolutionary Guard forces can board them regardless of U.S. Navy attendance nearby. Security becomes impossible without American ships penetrating Iranian territory, generating active war. That geographic reality provides Iran intensification dominance. They can capture vessels. America cannot prevent captures without war. Economic combat proceeds until oil prices surge, compelling diplomatic concessions Iran couldn't accomplish through negotiations, and Israel comprehends this perfectly. That's why Netanyahu's traveling to Washington Wednesday, requesting Trump authorize strikes removing Iranian interdiction capabilities before they exhibit Hormuz's closure crashes global economy. But here's Netanyahu's nightmare situation nobody examines publicly. American strikes targeting Iranian naval installations activate Iranian closure of Hormuz anyway as response. Oil prices surge regardless. Global recession follows, and Iran successfully weaponized geography. America cannot respond militarily, so strikes don't prevent economic disaster. They guarantee it by compelling Iranian intensification from selective interdictions to complete closure, which means Trump confronts impossible predicament. Authorized strikes guaranteeing oil emergency or acknowledge Iranian interdiction capability permanently modifying regional power relations. India's role complicates this further. New Delhi captured Iranian tankers serving U.S. sanctions implementation. But India also needs Iranian oil, and Modi government withdrew from Chabahar port specifically because U.S. tariffs made Iranian partnership economically impossible. So India's trapped between American influence requesting sanctions implementation and Indian energy security demanding Iranian oil entry. Wednesday's captures served Washington's concerns, but continued intensification threatens Indian oil provisions from Persian Gulf, generating domestic political emergency Modi cannot afford. That inconsistency means India's maritime interdiction operation cannot sustain indefinitely. Eventually, New Delhi selects energy security over sanctions implementation, stops capturing Iranian tankers, and Iran gains permanent evidence that American sanctions regime depends on allies whose partnership evaporates when their concerns conflict. The 48-hour schedule exposed this vulnerability. 3 captures Wednesday, Iranian counter captures Thursday. If pattern continues, and nothing implies it won't, India confronts selection. Keep capturing tankers and observe Iranian interdictions, disrupt all Indian Persian Gulf oil imports, or stop implementation and observe American tariffs, eliminate Indian economy. Either result weakens both India and America while reinforcing Iran's stance, classic strategic adaptation employing adversaries, economic combat tactics against them. And Thursday's scheduling, hours before Oman discussions, meant Iranian negotiators entered Friday conferences holding advantage nobody anticipated. They exhibited interdiction capabilities, captured vessels, imprisoned crews, all while American diplomats advocated nuclear limitations. Iran now has less motivation to acknowledge. Why would Iran restrict nuclear initiative when maritime interdiction capabilities already supply strategic deterrence? Hormuz's closure warning accomplished similar outcome, making American military intervention prohibitively expensive economically, even if kinetically successful. The negotiations continued despite maritime intensifications, but substantive compromise became impossible once Thursday's captures proved Iran willing to weaponize geography regardless of diplomatic advancement. Steve Witkoff and envoys negotiated in Oman, while IRGC forces boarded tankers in Persian Gulf. The disconnect between diplomatic conversations and maritime circumstances means discussions cannot succeed because military realities on water override negotiating stances in conference chambers. Iran's stance strengthens daily, not through nuclear progression, through exhibited maritime combat capabilities that don't violate non-proliferation arrangements but accomplish similar strategic outcomes. And Israel cannot tolerate this. Netanyahu's Wednesday Washington journey will request Trump remove Iranian naval capabilities before they fully weaponize Hormuz's geography, making Israeli security dependent on Iranian restraint. But American strikes activate the exact intensification they're designed to prevent. Iranian closure, oil emergency, global recession, strategic overcome disguised as tactical military achievement. The 48-hour capture cascade proved maritime combat already intensified beyond diplomatic management. 5 tankers, 40 crew members imprisoned, billions in cargo impounded. And that's just beginning of economic confrontation that terminates either through war or American acknowledgement of Iranian regional superiority. Markets haven't fully analyzed implications yet. But when insurance corporations announce Hormuz transit rate expansions and oil corporations announce route diversions and transportation firms announce capacity limitations, then global economy experiences influence of maritime combat that erupted last week. Wednesday's Netanyahu-Trump conference occurs understanding maritime combat already commenced, and neither America nor Israel can prevent Iranian intensification without activating global economic disaster. Before 48-hour capture cascade, Netanyahu could request strikes asserting Iranian capabilities remain theoretical warnings demanding preemptive intervention. After 5 tanker captures, Netanyahu must request strikes understanding Iranian interdiction capabilities are operational, proven, and already disrupting global transportation regardless of American military dominance. That operational capability transforms presidential choice calculus fundamentally. Authorizing strikes against adversary already exhibiting economic combat capacity means guaranteeing the exact oil emergency strikes are supposed to prevent. And Netanyahu comprehends this, but Israeli domestic politics demand exhibiting strength through intervention regardless of strategic reasoning. Corruption proceedings, October 7th investigations, coalition instability all request Netanyahu generate military victories, distracting from political breakdowns. So Netanyahu advocates for strikes, despite understanding they guarantee Iranian Hormuz closure, oil price surges, and global recession, because political continuation demands intervention even when intervention generates disastrous results. Trump confronts that influence Wednesday, Israeli administrator requesting authorization, military advisors cautioning about economic ramifications, oil markets already nervous from last week's captures. Any indication of impending military intervention activates immediate oil price surges before combat even commences. The inconsistency paralyzes American decision-making. Strike and crash global economy. Don't strike and acknowledge Iranian regional superiority. Either selection delivers strategic overcome through different mechanisms. But Iran's 48-hour intensification generated additional influence dimension nobody's examining. The crew imprisonment advantage, 15 foreign nationals held by Iran, Iranian crews held by India, 8 Indian sailors still confined from December capture. Each imprisoned person represents government obligated to secure their release. Those obligations generate diplomatic limitations preventing maximum influence tactics. Can't authorize strikes when Iranian response might execute imprisoned foreign nationals. Can't sustain hardline stances when citizens languish in adversary prisons. So crew imprisonments become bargaining instruments compelling moderation. And Iran comprehends this. That's why February's captures imprisoned maximum crew quantities, not just interdicting cargo, taking human hostages, guaranteeing diplomatic participation. The Indian dimension adds complexity. 8 Indian sailors imprisoned since December. India captured 3 Iranian tankers Wednesday. Iran counter-captured Thursday. Each cycle expands imprisonment quantities, generating domestic influence on Modi government to secure citizens' liberty. India's eventual concession releasing captured Iranian tankers to secure Indian sailors' liberty will exhibit that crude imprisonment advantage functions. Other nations observe future maritime interdictions, emphasize crew imprisonments over cargo captures. Human advantage outweighs economic disruption. And this represents Iranian strategic innovation nobody anticipated. Traditional maritime combat targeted vessels. Modern Iranian method targets crews, makes every capture human rights emergency, demanding diplomatic settlement regardless of underlying sanctions reasonings. Western governments cannot publicly acknowledge Crew safety outweighs sanctions implementation. But private negotiations emphasize human lives. Iran utilizes that distance between public rhetoric and private emphasis. The 48 hours also revealed systematic intensification. Nobody's organized to respond. Wednesday, India captures tankers. Thursday, Iran counter-captures. Friday, discussions in Oman. Pattern implies next week brings additional captures until diplomatic settlement accomplished or kinetic force employed. But kinetic force means war, and war means Hormuz closure, and closure means oil prices doubling, and doubled prices mean global recession. Circular reasoning paralyzing both military intervention and diplomatic compromise. Iran generated this paralysis deliberately through 48-hour intensification, exhibiting capabilities, capturing advantage, and foreclosing American choices simultaneously. Markets will react next week once examination spreads. Oil futures rise, transportation insurance expands, tanker route diversions commence, all before combat commences because maritime combat already proved Iranian capabilities warrant market anxieties, and Netanyahu's Wednesday requests for strikes occur amid that market nervousness. Trump must determine whether authorizing intervention prevents or guarantees the economic disaster markets already calculating in. The crude imprisonment angle supplies Trump potential off-ramp, emphasize securing imprisoned nationals through diplomatic channels, present restraint as securing American citizens rather than acknowledging Iranian aggression. Avoid military intervention while sustaining political credibility, but Netanyahu won't acknowledge that presentation. Israeli concerns demand American strikes regardless of crude imprisonment complications. So Wednesday's conference pits Israeli political continuation against American economic concerns with imprisoned sailors as human shields preventing settlement. 5 tanker captures in 48 hours generated strategic predicament with no excellent answers. Only selections about which disastrous result proves least destructive to American concerns. Strike and guarantee oil emergency through Iranian response. Don't strike and acknowledge Iranian maritime superiority through exhibited interdiction capabilities. Emphasize crew releases and legitimize Iranian imprisonment advantage. Every route leads to strategic overcome through different mechanisms. Welcome to maritime economic combat, where tanker captures replace naval battles and crew imprisonments substitute for military victories. Iran weaponized geography, imprisonment advantage, and economic psychology simultaneously. America doesn't comprehend how to respond combat where adversaries benefits. Closeness to Hormuz, willingness to imprison crews, tolerance for economic disruption outweigh American strengths in technology, firepower, and naval attendance. 48 hours, 5 captures. Strategic paradigm transformation. And Wednesday's conference determines whether America engages war it cannot win economically or acknowledges overcome it cannot acknowledge politically. The imprisoned sailors observe and wait, pawns and strategic game, where their liberty depends on assessments they cannot affect and choices they will never execute. Iran holds advantages. America confronts selections. Netanyahu requests intervention. The global economy trembles, awaiting result of maritime combat that erupted last week, while diplomats pretended discussions could prevent what already commenced. I'm Dav from 3 Daily News.